Hey, good afternoon, guys, and welcome to another edition of the American Hotspur here on Stateside Footy. Before we get into it, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you do not miss out on any content here on Stateside Footy. So let's go ahead and get after it because we actually have ourselves a nice little show today. All right. So quickly, we got Wayne Bonner in the chat who says, "Good evening, afternoon, Steve, and everyone in the chat. Hope you're well. I fancy a 2-0 Spurs win against Villa." Yeah, I love it, Wayne. Good to have you along as well, too. All right, man, we got some news and notes, so let's begin right here. I know this isn't exactly Tottenham news, but it's Tottenham adjacent, as Ange Postecoglou was sacked after 40 days in charge at Nottingham Forest, and of course, the body language says everything. But that being said, here's the thing: I think you guys know exactly how much of a Ange Postecoglou guy that I am. I absolutely respect the guy, but I think he got this one wrong. I wouldn't say it was a bad appointment, but what I'm saying is you got to read the temperature in the room, Ange. And what do I mean by that? Obviously, Marinakis wanted, front foot attacking football. But that being said, Ange Postecoglou should have had the wherewithal to look at the roster and understand that this roster was not built for him, that it was going to actually take some time to at least get to a summer window before he would be able to even get remotely some of the players that he needed in order to actually play it. And the fact that he went 0-60 and started implementing some of his ideas on a roster that didn't necessarily fit him, he didn't have the time. He didn't have the time in order to accomplish that. It was kind of surprising too, because I thought he would at least start off, playing a style of football that suited the roster that was there for him, while kind of trying to implement some of his ideas along the way, so you can actually get to a point where you might be able to play that style of football. But that being said, it just didn't work out for him. Was unable to get a win. And of course, this comes on the heels of 4 hours after they lose to Chelsea 3-0. And it's absolutely terrible. For a guy that I actually have a tremendous amount of respect for, man, I actually kind of put this right on his feet, because at the end of the day, man, you have to know exactly the roster that you're playing to. And you also, with European play, you just don't have the time to implement this style of football. And it's unfortunate too, because I actually think Ange can compete in the Premier League. It's just, that being said, it's like you have to understand exactly what, you got to play to the strengths of the players in which you had. And quite simply, he just didn't have the players in order to execute, and it's too bad. But that being said, man, Ange Postecoglou is out. I wish him the best of luck, but it is what it is. But again, right, you're not going to have you're not going to have any type of success, chopping and changing tactics on the fly, and then expect your team to kind of adjust to it and play, good attacking front football. There were moments when it looked good, but the reality was it's like, doing that wouldn't work, as in playing a little bit more pragmatic approach, as he did last season in the Europa League, probably would have been the right starting point. And again, implementing some of your ideas along the way. So by the time that you get to January, your players know exactly which way the wind is blowing. And then you can actually get a few guys in the January window that actually is going to be able to help you along. It just, he took the wrong approach, and unfortunately, he gets sacked. Wayne Bonner says, logically, Ange should have played the kind of football we played in Europe last season. If he refuses a change and adapt, then failure follows him. 100%, 150%. And that's the thing. It's like, had he started off with the pragmatic approach that he implemented last year in the Europa League as a starting point, which actually kind of fit the Nottingham Forest roster, and you just slowly just kind of, implement some of your ideas and terminology, by the time you get to January and you get some guys through the door where they're going to help you actually achieve some of the things that you want, maybe then you might be able to play that swashbuckling, front foot attacking football. But it just didn't work out for him. And unfortunately, he just didn't have the players. It just is what it is, man. Let's go. Let's turn to this one as well too, because it looks like Johan Lang and Paratici are going to share the sporting director role. And this one, it was a little bit of a surprise to me because Johan Lang actually gets promoted into this role as Paratici is officially now under the Tottenham umbrella. Now, apparently, the roles are going to be a little different. Fabio Paratici will be in charge of first team recruiting, while Johan Lang is probably going to be a little bit more geared toward the youth side. And I actually kind of like this. Now, as long as these guys can work together, and as long as there is not one of these guys plotting against the other, I think this actually could work for Tottenham Hotspur. One of the things that Tottenham has to focus on is their youth recruitment, especially with the academy as well too, because that could be a vehicle, for profit. Let's just keep it real. Big clubs use their academies for that, essentially for that purpose, where they can get young kids, bring them up in their system, get them to the first team, potentially give them minutes, and then put them in the shop window as a vehicle to essentially prop up their bottom line when it comes to profit, right? And it's one of the things that Spurs have just historically not been good. Sure, there have been the outliers that have come through their academy system, to go on to first team greatness. But that being said, it's very far and few in between. And also, they don't even use their academy. Me personally, I think that is 100% true, that they don't use their academy the way that what I would consider other Big Six clubs, how they use their academy. It almost seems to be an afterthought. So at least with Johan Lang working on that side of things, it seems to be logical, considering that's kind of his bread and butter. For Paratici, having him and his connections, whether that be in Italy, Spain, Germany, the Netherlands, whatever the case may be, and also potentially South American leagues as well too. Having that dude in charge of first team, essentially first team recruitment. It's going to lead to far better turnover with the first team, which means better players, and even the sell of players that historically we, for whatever reason, don't necessarily move on. So from this side of things, I actually like this. One of the bigger things that I like is the fact that it feels like Tottenham Hotspur now are all moving in the right direction. Now that Daniel Levy is out, it feels like from the top with the ownership group, it seems like they're committed to the football club. With Vinny with Vinny through the door as president, it looks like he's pulling that same direction. Same thing now with the sporting directors, and of course Thomas Frank as head coach. It just feels like Tottenham Hotspur are now actually in sync, and it seems like the goals are aligned from the top all the way down, which is actually something that's kind of a breath of fresh air, because we had no idea exactly what moving parts, what direction those moving parts were going in during the Daniel Levy era. So from that standpoint, that to me is a win, because one of the things that you have to sell to incoming players is Tottenham Hotspur. And if it's chaos underneath ownership group, or you have a sporting director that doesn't like a coach that doesn't like the chairman, whatever the case may be, it's not a good environment for players to come in. It's just not. And of course, players and agents talk. And I would probably assume one of the biggest reasons why Tottenham had such a hard time recruiting is because if a player wants to win, not necessarily just for the money, there were other options available that would put him in a better environment, not only to get the money but also to win. So hopefully now that this has been worked out, Tottenham Hotspur can actually kick on as a legit top six club, and also push on with some of the bigger names in Europe, and potentially get to the point where we all feel like Tottenham can be, which is winning Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues and things of that nature. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic with these two, and I would love to see this play out over a 3-year period to see if this actually can work. But I think we're going to know straight away within the January window exactly how this thing is going to move, right? So I guess my biggest question is like what if Johan Lang puts a file on the desk of Paratici about a young kid who potentially has first team aspirations or might be on the cusp of the first team, and whether Paratici agrees with him or not. You know what I mean? It's going to be interesting to see exactly how that plays out. The other piece right here, over the international break, it looks like Enoch, Joe Lewis has injected 100 million pounds into Spurs. And this one's kind of interesting because I wonder if fans understand what the 100 million is about. Because for me, the first time when I heard this, my first initial thought went to the $279 million still owed. Excuse me, the 270 million pound that are still owed for the outstanding transfer debt of what Spurs have been able to do over the course of the last couple of years. Because really, how it reads out is Spurs essentially bought players on a credit card, and of course, with the amortization of some of these contracts and how some of these things are spread out, the transfer fees are spread out. On one hand, you could probably say, well, Daniel Levy got it right, making sure that there was going to necessarily be no overhead debt. But sooner or later, some of these things were going to come into play. And considering the transfer business that happened over the summer, right, I would probably assume that there had to be some sort of cash injection into the club that would offset some of the debts that are actually coming up, that actually came into play. And that was where that's where my mind first came into this, because it was the only thing that made sense. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? Because what they're saying is that this investment is intended to support the club's long-term ambition and is being viewed as a wide-ranging injection of cash through those specifics weren't necessarily made public. So also it's worth noting that the investment comes as the Lewis family rejected several takeover offers from the club. Now, the thing about this is, I don't necessarily think any of these takeover bids were actually serious. I know that they rebuked, the Amanda Stavely one, the other guy, I forget his name right off the top, that was essentially, putting his business out there on X for whatever reason. He's got a goofy name, but his name slips me right now. But that being said, when fans heard this, the first thing was like, oh yeah, okay, cool, because now all of a sudden this is going to lead to potential January transfers on top of the cash that they saved in the summer. So, last night I know Adrian was talking about potentially 175 million pounds that are going to be available. And I don't know, man. I don't know if this is actually set aside or going to be set aside for specific transfers. For me, I don't know, man. I thought this was all about, essentially covering some immediate debts, based on the fact that, they spread out certain transfers. And now, some of these transfer fees are starting to come up. That's where my mind went to, but I'm curious to see exactly how you guys feel. Also, let me know in the chat as well, too, how you feel about this, whether or not you actually think this 100 million pounds is actually going to be for player sales. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that being said, I mean, I've been proven wrong before, so it is what it is. Let's see what Wayne Bonner says here. I'd stick Lang in charge of the reserves, etc., and leave Paratici in charge of the first team. Yeah, that's actually how it reads. By the way, Wayne, it reads that Paratici is going to be in charge of recruitment for the first team, while Johan Lang is essentially the sporting director on the youth side. I would probably assume also maybe good young first team type of youth players. Like, obviously, he was wildly successful with Lucas Bergvall and Archie Gray and some of these young guys that have stuck around to the first team. But that being said, I would probably assume that he's going to be in charge with overhauling the youth academy as well too, and trying to at least kind of streamline the process for Spurs to be able to capitalize, I guess you can call profit-wise, off the academy. But that being said, that's how it reads to me right now. But again, we're going to find out sooner rather than later. Hold on real quick. Let's do this one. Let's see. I'm interested in seeing what the Lewis kids can do. I don't know what the I don't know what exactly what the Lewis kids have in mind. But that being said, it's like what's funny about it is like Joe Lewis himself comes to what, like maybe one Spurs match per year or one every 2 years. It's like he hasn't, like you can count on your one hand how many times Joe Lewis has actually been at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium since it's open, or at White Hart Lane since they took over, right? And it's the same thing with the Lewis kids, right? They're certainly not around all the time. I find it hard to believe that they're all of a sudden going to turn into the biggest Spurs supporters. I don't think that's the case. Me personally, I think the only reason why they're around is to make sure that everything is settled post Daniel Levy, to make sure that this club is moving in the same direction, moving in the same as far as revenue goes, making sure that that is unchanged. Now, whether or not this club is actually going to have ambition, that is something that we're going to have to see. And again, you guys let me know how you feel about this, because I don't necessarily know if the $100 million injection is necessarily earmarked for player sales. I just, a big part of me just believes that it's because of the 279 million pounds that are still owed from incoming transfers over the course of the last couple seasons. So me personally, I think that debt's probably starting to come up, and there's a reason why they had to inject cash into the club. He goes, do with the club, their transfer business in January will be interesting. Yeah, 100%, Wayne. And that's the thing, right? So far, they've apparently rebuffed takeover attempts. Now, of course, by the way, every club has a price. Every club has a price. And I would probably assume that they're waiting for the right offer to come in, because a big part of me believes that the Lewis family wants to get out of the football business, and I think they've said as much over the years. So from that standpoint, I think they're just waiting for the right offer from that special someone that's going to offer him $5-6 billion for the club, and they're going to cash out. Me personally, that's what I believe all along. Let's see. I doubt that money's for transfers. Personally, I think transfer funds have been put aside already. Exactly. I do too. And by the way, I think it's set on the yearly profit of which they take in, right? Their turnover, by the way, there's a reason why their wage to turnover is still at 42 to 44, something around there. Versus like a team like Aston Villa that's like at 92%, right? There's a reason why they kept it low. And even with the summer incomings, it didn't spike their turnover to their wage to turnover ratio, right? So for me, I think that is actually a direct correlation to ambition. That's just me. Let's see. It says, I want to see if Lewis's daughter loves the club as much as she makes out, or she. Well, clearly she didn't like Levy. Clearly she didn't like Levy. But that being said, it's like do you all of a sudden believe that the Lewis family all of a sudden loves Spurs when they've essentially been persona non grata this entire time, as Daniel Levy essentially was the face of the club? There's a reason why some owners choose to be around while others just kind of stay in the Bahamas. So it is what it is. Lastly, Rando Kolo Muani is set to make his Premier League debut with the Spurs over the international break. Apparently, he's been ramping up his training, and it looks like that tomorrow against Aston Villa, it looks like he is going to make his debut. Now, whether that is in a starting role or coming off the bench, that we do not know. But from everything that I've been hearing, and of course, Thomas Frank also backed it up, Rando Kolo Muani will make his Premier League debut with Spurs tomorrow, which is actually kind of nice considering, what we just don't have at the striker position is something that Kolo Muani might be able to give us. Now, it's interesting though, and this is just my personal opinion. I don't know if Randall Kolo Muani has the same skill sets for what we actually need from the striker position. But that being said, as a direct player, Randall Kolo Muani is far better than Richarlison and fucking night and day better than Matisse Tell. Granted, Matisse Tell actually is, actually had a great game against Leeds. I'm not going to take anything away from him. But that being said, it's like, when you talk about the experience of playing absolutely big time European play, Randall Kolo Muani's got it, whether that's with PSG, whether that's Juventus, and he's got the experience. One thing we don't know is whether or not Randall Kolo Muani can handle the pace and the pressure of the Premier League. It's one thing to do it at PSG and do it in Ligue 1 and do it with Juventus down in Serie A, but let's be honest, those two leagues certainly are not the Premier League. And so I'm curiously optimistic, but we're not going to know until we actually see him play and what that actually looks like. But that being said, one of the things that we desperately need at that striker position is somebody that actually has that skill set around net to get themselves in a position where they can put the ball in the back of the net. Also attacking channels and, getting on the end of weighted balls through. So I am actually curiously optimistic with Randall Kolo Muani, but it's going to be nice. It's going to be nice to actually have that type of experience now at the striker position. So it depends on whether Frank plays him up front or on the left. I'm looking to see Simons. Yeah. See, that's the thing. It's like, here's the thing. It's like I am actually done with multiple position players. The reason why Spurs have done it is because they're cheap, man. That's the reality. It's like guys who, the guys who can play multiple positions, but not necessarily play one great. There's a reason why they're actually quite affordable, right? So we kind of got out of that this summer with Mohamed Kudus, who is a right winger, a guy like Xavi Simons, who prior to coming to Spurs, literally for club and country, was playing at the 10. That's his natural position, right? And of course, Randall Kolo Muani is a striker. Yes, he can play on the left, but that's not his position, right? So if you're going to play him, you're going to have to play him in his best position, which is striker, which means, I'm actually okay with the idea of Wilson Odobert playing on the left-hand side. Like you might be able to actually develop a little bit better with him playing with good players such as Kolo, Xavi, and Kudus, right? You actually might be able to start that developmental curve with Wilson Odobert. And of course, I think he's been playing well up to this point where I think it's actually justifiable that he actually starts now on the left without any type of interruption. Like, I'm tired of the idea of Brendan Johnson on the left. I'm tired of the idea of people bringing up, Richie on the left. Yeah, he can play there, but he's just not good. He's not good in those, but both of those guys are not good in that position, right? I understand you need depth. Okay, great. And you might be able to rotate. But that being said, Wilson Odobert should be playing on the left with Randall Kolo Muani up top until Dominic Solanke is ready to actually get back into this team. Because at that point, then you can chop and change with Kolo Muani and Solanke. Me personally, I think Richarlison is pretty much done as far as I'm concerned. 100%. All right, so let's get into it because Spurs take on Aston Villa tomorrow. I think it's like at 9:00 here on the East Coast of the United States from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I'm actually quite charged up for this one, considering that we're going to be in front of the home supporters, considering that we got the monkey off the back a little bit with the win against Leeds heading into the international break, which is something we hadn't done in a few years. So from that standpoint, I'm curious to see if the momentum is going to carry over. Now, here's the thing: the opponent is a curious tale. Aston Villa right now are sitting in 13th place on 9 points, 2 wins through the first 7, and only 6 goals scored. The interesting thing about this is that after, me personally, I kind of like digging into opponents a little bit. And one of the things that I noticed is that Unai Emery, the head coach of Aston Villa, doesn't necessarily hang around for long-term projects. He's the type of coach that will come in, get the very best out of the players that he inherits, and usually gets them to kick on. And when you look at the 3 years that he's been in charge, I think he got him to the Conference League in his first year, Champions League in the second year, and now in the Europa League in year 3. And this is usually the time frame in which Unai Emery usually exits stays left, because there's usually a crash and burn. And so far this season, it kind of points to something like that might happen. And when you look at Aston Villa and you look at the players, you're like, it literally baffles me that they're in this position. But that being said, you kind of get the impression that the players aren't necessarily, you wonder whether or not the players are tuning them out. And that certainly is a little bit of a part of the problem. The other problem is Aston Villa is kind of old. When you look at the interesting thing is, I remember watching Aston Villa play against Sunderland earlier this season. And here's the interesting thing. 7 of the 11 players that were in the starting 11 were around when Unai Emery took over. And when you look at the average age of their crew, it's kind of pushing 29 years old. So they're kind of a little bit old, which kind of explains why a lot of these guys aren't necessarily pushing forward a lot. You don't see them make late runs into the box. As a matter of fact, you see a lot of the players drop a little bit deeper, to make touches. The other problem is the fact that, he doesn't necessarily have guys that hug the touchline, right? In order for Aston Villa to actually be successful, they actually have to have width pushing up the pitch. And what's interesting about it is when you look at some of the guys that have been playing on the wing, they've been dropping deep, or they're going to drift a little bit more centrally, making it easy for their opponents to defend. Also, when you look at the fact that, one of the things that was interesting, which made Aston Villa a little bit, decent in the second half of last season, is they had guys like Marcus Rashford that kind of alleviated some of those problems. But when you look at Malin, and you look at who's the other guy that they brought in from Nice, his name is slipping my mind right now. But the interesting thing is, number one, they don't have a guy who wants to play on the right side. Most of them want to play on the left-hand side, or they want to play as the number 10. And the interesting thing is Unai Emery still, he's been vocal about it. He still hasn't necessarily figured out how to fix some of these problems. On top of the fact that you get a lot of players that just very, very much seem to be disinterested. Point in case, it was funny because Morgan Rogers, who is actually, still a very good player, hasn't necessarily played well for club, but as soon as he steps into the England squad, he looks absolutely brilliant, right? So that's it. It's these little telltale signs that make you kind of make you get your antenna up, and you kind of wonder whether or not something's happened with Villa. But that being said, it's like, Austin, when Unai Emery took over in 2022, one of the biggest demands was the only reason why he went there is because they gave him full control. And one of the things that they haven't been able to do is rejuvenate that club with some younger players to kind of offset some of the things, some of the problems that they've been dealing with over the course of the last couple of years, which is the fact that some of their best players are starting to age out a little bit. And I'm wondering if that's what we're kind of seeing now with Aston Villa. And all of that saying, and by the way, we got the Spurs Danalist right here. What's going on, my guy? Big up to you as well, too. And one of the biggest problems is, on top of the fact that, there's not a lot of moving parts for Unai Emery, the fact that they're, when you're kind of looking ahead and you're wondering how they're going to be able to figure it out, even though they have a relatively, low net spend. But when you look at the fact that, their wage sheet is over bloated, you wonder whether or not this thing can be corrected in a January window. I don't think it actually does. They were forced to sell Jalen Ramsey to their one of their biggest rivals because they actually had to show something. They actually had to have a big sell. during this last summer, specifically for for PSR issues. But overall, man, Aston Villa seems to be stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I don't necessarily think this gets better. Clearly, I think they have the talent where they can avoid a potential relegation. I don't think they're going to be in a relegation scrap, but as of right now, it's looking. I feel like they're going to actually continue to be worse before it gets better. On the flip side, when you look at Tottenham Hotspur and you look at the last couple matches where it necessarily didn't start well and they conceded, but yet they showed the resolve to get back into the match, right? Me personally, I think that's a sign of a good team. I also think that there's also some issue with moving parts, and maybe the over rotation of Thomas Frank has, I guess you can say, slowed the chemistry when it comes to partnerships on the pitch. Because me personally, I think football is all about partnerships and the continuity and the chemistry that is developed, whether that's with center back pairings or whether that's within the double pivot, or whether that's with fullbacks to wingers and 10s with strikers. Like that does not develop unless you're actually playing some of these guys when it really matters. And me personally, Spurs' biggest priority has to be the Premier League. The Premier League is where it starts. The Premier League is where it ends. And so when I'm looking at this match, I'm looking at partnerships that should not be interrupted. And by the way, we have Wayne Bonner right here who says Emery isn't a long-term manager yet. That's exactly right. He's not. As a matter of fact, I think the longest tenure he might have had was Sevilla, I think. But outside of that, he's, I think his average stay is somewhere between 18 to 22 months, and that's it. Anyway. Like, I personally believe partnerships are everything, right? Which is why I think Cuti Romero and Van de Ven have formed probably the best partnership as far as center back pairings in the Premier League. If they're not one, they're in the top three. And I also feel the same way with Rodrigo Betancourt and João Palhinha. I think those two, the more that those two are going to be playing together, the better the chemistry is going to be. And I also think that's actually going to work well with Rodrigo Betancourt. Especially when what we need him to do, which is, to be a little bit more than just a box to box. We need him to be a little bit more higher up the pitch and being a little bit more dangerous. And it's not something we have seen since the injury, right? As a matter of fact, I think it happened against Aston Villa, and correct me if I'm wrong. That was, it was Matty Cash, the one that did it, right? So from that standpoint, just knowing, like, that's the thing. It's just knowing that a guy like João Palhinha is playing behind you. The comfort of knowing that dude's got your back it does allow players to actually take risks a little bit, right? It's the reason why sometimes you'll see Van de Ven float forward, because he knows his backside is covered by Cuti Romero and vice versa. It's the same reason why Destiny Udogie will bomb on an overlap, knowing that if it breaks out, he's got João Palhinha, he's got Van de Ven back there, and he also understands that Wilson Odegaard is not afraid to track back as well too, right? That being said, it's like same thing with Xavi and whoever our striker is going to be. And when I look at this matchup and I'm looking at what Aston Villa is going to try to do, I don't think they're going to sit 10 behind the ball. I don't believe that at all. But what I do think is that tactically, when I set this up and I'm looking at it, just from a Tottenham perspective, I don't see an area where we can't implement what we're trying to do, whether that is playing over the top, whether that's trying to bomb down either wing, trying to get ourselves in a position 1v1 to play balls in the box. I don't see an area of the pitch where we have a disadvantage. And even if we want to play direct, potentially through the center, like knowing that Matisse Tell is not afraid to attack a channel. And now with the potential of Randall Kolo-Muani, again, I just don't see I don't see an area of the pitch where where we're going to be at a disadvantage. Wayne Bonner says teamwork relies on partnerships. Betancourt, Polina, VDV, Romero. This is the foundation to build on. We have Star, Bergvall, Gray to come in as well too. Option, yeah, 100%. And I'm going to get into that as well too, because it's something that I actually have to address, because it's something like I don't understand Spurs fans at times, and I understand it, right? When a player has a string of a couple good games, they feel like they're unplayable, and they should be on the pitch all the time. But me personally, I think players need to understand their rules, and the more that Thomas Frank addresses that and has communicated those roles, I think the easier for certain guys that are going to get comfortable those roles, and they're actually going to take advantage of the opportunities when given. Me personally, right? One of the things that a football team has to be is strong down the spine. And what can you say? What can you say about Spurs at the moment, right? We don't know who our striker is. We think we know who our cam is. But then again, we've also seen rotation where, that's interesting. We've also seen rotation in the box to box as well too. We know for a fact who our goalkeeper and our center backs are, but down the spine, it's a hodgepodge, right? So, that's why I think that the midfield three, even when my guy Kulusevski comes back, right? Unless Thomas Frank is willing to switch things up and play in a 3-4-2-1, which I highly doubt. Maybe every once in a while, but I highly doubt. Those three have to be on the pitch in the Premier League. You can rotate in cup matches, okay, fine, or depending on your Champions League opponent. But for the Premier League, your midfield three of Polina, Betancourt, and Xavi should be on that pitch every single weekend, right? The more that those guys can get comfortable with each other, the more that they understand body language and understand where their positioning is going to be, the easier it is for those three, to combine, whether that's on the counter or in the buildup. Having those three must be on the pitch. I think it's going to give this team far better. I think it's going to give this team far better numbers moving forward than saying trying to play Xavi on the left with Bergvall at the 10, or Papsar at the 10, and then rotating Bergvall for Betancourt. It just like the last thing you want to do is put this team as a disadvantage. Now, that being said, I do believe that Papsar and Lucas Bergvall definitely have a stated role on this team. And me personally, the idea of bringing in a Papsar or a Lucas Bergvall in the 65th minute, knowing that your opponents, especially in their defensive front, especially if we're chasing a goal or if we're trying to tack on a goal, having fresh legs and having those two who have the ability to pop in a goal at any given moment is actually more of an advantage for us than not. And I've been consistent in saying it. As much as I love Lucas Bergvall, and I do think that Lucas is going to be a starter within the next 2 seasons, I also think he's going to be a best of 11 type player. But right now for this team, the best thing that Thomas Frank can do is understand that right now, his best role right now is coming off the bench as a first or second coming off the bench. And especially understanding exactly what you're going to be asked to do in that time frame, versus continuous rotation, continuing slow starts, continuously putting ourselves in a position. Now, I'm not saying those guys are the reason why, but it's heavy rotation that has kind of slowed this team from achieving fast starts. Let's see. Yeah, the strongest and build the others. Yeah, exactly. See, what's interesting about it, like last year there were a few teams that had a Premier League roster or a Premier League 11, and then they had a European 11, and then a cup 11, right? And now, granted, we don't necessarily have the squad size to pull that off, but we certainly do have the squad size to actually kind of develop too. Whether that be Premier League and Cup sides, or whether it's Premier League, Champions League, and then you can kind of mix a hodgepodge for a cup roster. But that being said, it's like our best 11 has to be out there every single weekend. And me personally, our best 11 right now, and this is no disrespect to certain players, but it's Vicario, Udogie, Van de Ven, Cudi Romero, Pedro Porro, João Plenia, Rodrigo Betancourt, Xavi Simons at the 10, Destiny Udogie off the left, Rando Kolo up top, and then Mohamed Kudus off the right. And when we get guys like Dominic Solanke back, and when we get Kulusevski back, then all that does is just strengthen our bench. And then we can find out, we can systematically find out in certain competitions whether Kulusevski's ready to step back into the 11. And we'll figure it, like at that point, then we can figure it out where Kulusevski for best fits, and whether that's going to be, whether that's on the left, or whether that's a little bit more centrally, maybe even as an 8, because we know we can play on the right side. But that being said, it's only going to make this team better. And same thing with Dominic Solanke. And me personally, again, I'll go back to this thing that Dominic Solanke is actually a valuable piece right now, considering that we absolutely have no hold-up play at all from that position. And his work rate is invaluable. Let's see. Spurs fans have high expectations with the Champions League and Pacha's time as boss. I prefer reality when what happens. Yeah, I am too. And the thing about it is but in reality, Poch didn't win anything. That's the cool truth about it. Even with the Harry Kane in the peak of his powers, and some would probably say the same thing with Sonny and Dele Alli. Having a good Christian Eriksen, Moussa Dembele, what did it get us? We bowed out early in cup competitions, and the year that we were supposed to win it, Leicester won it. So, I understand the revisionist history as well too, because we all look back fondly on the Poch era, because we actually posted some of our best numbers and points totals in the Premier League. But that being said, it did not win us any silverware. And me personally, I'd rather look forward than backwards, because I actually think that, with Thomas Frank, I think that Thomas Frank has the ability to deliver the goods. And hopefully with a combination of a guy like Paratici and Vinay and the Lewis family, maybe we actually achieve it. Sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned now. I think Tottenham Hotspur as a club have turned a page and are starting to write a new chapter. And who knows, maybe we actually get back to the identity and the DNA of what it is to be a Tottenham Hotspur. We'll see. We'll see. Plus, we still have Kulu and Matters to come back well at some point. Yeah, I think Kulu is probably going to be back in November. I think he's going to be back before the calendar turns to December. As far as Matters goes, that's a next year issue. And then the question is how do you play Madison and Xavi, right? Trying to figure out a way to squeeze Mohamed Kudus on the pitch, right? My first inclination is a 3-4-2-1, because you can play Kudus wide as a wing back, but then you sacrifice Pedro Porro, right? So it's interesting, right? How do you squeeze the best 11 when you get Kulu and Madison and James Madison back? Very interesting conversation. But that being said, I look at this matchup, and I don't necessarily have a reason to think that Aston Villa can win this match. Now it's not about Villa, it's about Spurs. And it's all about what Spurs are how we're going to start, and what the best 11 is from that, right? Me personally, I would actually like to see this team start quick. And I'm talking about in the first 15 minutes of the game and trying, and essentially trying to be brave from the opening whistle and trying to get that first goal. It's something that, over the course of the last 3 years, Thomas Frank's Brentford team with not nearly the same talent as he has at his disposal now, we're able to use that as a form of their identity, being able to score early and taking, and essentially taking teams out of the game early and essentially pushing them onto their back foot before they're able to respond, right? And so from that standpoint, I would love to see that somewhat trickle in a little bit, right? So for me, this is all about not what Villa is going to do. It's about how are we going to start the match off, but also stop Villa from pushing us onto the back foot, because that's happened recently, where all of a sudden we expect a good start, and then all of a sudden, within the first 25 minutes, we're essentially on the back foot. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember watching the Bodo Glimt match in Europe. There was no excuse for that. And even within the first 30 minutes against Leeds, it almost felt like we were allowing them to have the ball. That's not an ideal start, because we actually end up conceding first when we have no business conceding. And then all of a sudden we're spending the next 40 minutes either chasing an equalizer, or we get one back and then they all, within 5 minutes they score again, right? So it's like, and then all of a sudden we're going to have to, within the 80 to 90th minute, we're trying to find an equalizer. And it's like, that's not a sustainable way to carry yourself through the Premier League. I hate to say that, like the way that we played against Burnley to open the season, where we literally commanded a good 80 minutes of possession. We were literally the one that were dictating the match. So that's the type of team that I want to see, even against a team like Aston Villa. Yes, Villa's going to are going to create opportunities for themselves, whether that's through the counter or whether we just don't press. They're going to have opportunities. Okay, fine. And they all obviously, you got to, Ollie Watkins, Morgan Rogers, the guy that they got from Malin, they got from Borussia Dortmund. They have some pieces, right? They have some pieces that can make you uncomfortable. But the reality is that it's like, who do we want to be tomorrow? What type of team are we trying to be against a team like Villa, who, by the way, even when Villa was good a couple years ago when they were chasing the Champions League, we went to Villa Park and put them under the sword, and we did it actually quite convincingly under Ange Postecoglou. So it's not like Villa, it's not like Villa is some worthy opponent, right? It's not like you're playing Liverpool or Arsenal, where it's going to take your best on that day to beat them. I'm not saying that we can slough off 30 minutes and figure out a way to pull it out, right? Like, we have to be dialed in from the beginning, right? And again, there's no excuses, considering we're coming off the 2-week break. And a lot of these guys, some of them played internationally. A lot of these guys were back at Hotspur Way getting their training. And so from that standpoint, there's no excuses. All right, so we're about in the 50th minute now of this podcast. So I want to finish this off by giving you my prediction. And I think Wayne Bonner in the chat has said he expects a 2-0 victory tomorrow. I'm curious, Wayne, who is your goal scorers tomorrow? I'm curious about that. And also, you guys out there, let me know exactly what you feel, how tomorrow is going to play out, what your score prediction is, and who are your scorers. I actually, last night, I predicted on Spurs Diehards TTID, I predicted a 2-1 Spurs win, because, we're going to concede at least one. Like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but, we're going to concede one. I'd love to see a clean sheet. I would absolutely love to see a clean sheet. But what I would like to see more, though, is a concerted counterattack, because here's the one thing that I have noticed with Aston Villa this year is that they are prone to give up goals coming off the counter. When you give them time to actually set up defensively, they can be a pain in the ass to break down. Not saying that Spurs don't have the talent to break them down. I'm just saying it's like they're far more easier. They're far more prone at conceding goals when you actually catch them flat-footed. So I would like to actually see Spurs take chances in those areas, play balls over the top, get their speed and pace involved, and put themselves in a position where they might be able to nick a goal or two off the counterattack. I got them 2-1. I think Ollie Watkins scores. Villa's 1, but I got who do I got scoring? So I got Mohamed Kudus scoring a goal, and then I got Mikey Van de Ven with a cheeky little center back goal tomorrow as well too. I got that 2-1. And by the way, Wayne, here's the thing, right? Like for the last 3 weeks, I predicted a Xavi Simons goal. I'm not doing that this week because me personally, I think I've been the jinx. I'm going to roll with that. I think that's the case. But yeah, that's the thing. So I got Spurs 2, Villa 1, goals by Kudus and Van de Ven. That's my prediction tomorrow. But also my starting 11 is in goal. I have Vicario. At left back, I have Destiny Udogie. And again, this has nothing to do with the ability or inability of Jed Spence. Me personally, I just think, especially when we're actually starting talking about the attack, whether it's in the counter or the buildup, the width that Destiny Udogie gives this team, also, especially with his ability to overlap and actually burn defenders. Me personally, I think he gives far more in the attack than what Jed Spence is able to do. Don't get me wrong, I like Jed Spence, and I think he's a very good 1v1 defender. But that being said, this is again, same thing. You're talking about partnerships and also chemistry and continuity. Destiny Udogie has to be on the pitch in order for him to continue to develop. That dude's a stud. That dude is, excuse me, that dude's legit, and he needs to be playing. I got Mikey Van de Ven and Cudi Romero, obviously. And on the right, I have Pedro Porro. My midfield 3 is Polinia, Betancourt, and Xavi at the 10. And my attacking 3 is Wilson Odobert on the left, Matisse Tell starting up top, and then I have Kudus up off the right. And then, of course, my first 3 off the bench are Randall Colomwani, Pafsar, and then Lucas Bergvall. And then maybe if you want to bring Jed Spence in on late, you can. Same thing with Archie Gray. Me personally, I think that's going to be the best possible way for Spurs to take care of business tomorrow. I do think Randall Colomwani's me personally, I think he's going to get significant minutes. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he came in the 60th, 65th minute, somewhere in there, long enough where he can get settled and also potentially have an impact, even potentially nicking a goal late. But the reality is, I want to see both Jed Spence and not Jed Spence, but Matisse Tell and Wilson Odobert again after their performances against Leeds. I understand different scenario, different defense. Different defensive setup. I get it. But that being said, it's like when you see those type of performances, number one, they should be rewarded. But also, number two, you wonder what kind of motivation or what kind of momentum those two are going to be able to carry in, right? Because who knows, maybe those two, have been pairing up in training, and those two understand where each other are going to be on the pitch, especially with inside the box. So me personally, I want to see those two start. I don't think this is going to be a situation for Brendan Johnson to get on the pitch. I think Brendan Johnson's going to be more midweek against Monaco. Same thing with Richarlison. I just don't see. Yeah, I just don't see where Brendan Johnson fits into this equation this week against Aston Villa. Me personally, I think when you're talking about potential impact as far as as far as goal involvement is concerned, I think that potentially suits him a little bit better against Monaco than it would be for Aston Villa. And again, it's no disrespect. It's just I think we know where Brendan Johnson's skill level is at in the current moment. And by the way, it's not on the left side. So this could be a situation where maybe he gets a start with Richarlison off the right, and maybe maybe somebody plays a little bit different on the left, or maybe it's Richarlison on the left and Kolo Muani getting his first start against Monaco. Who knows? But I just don't think that those guys should be in consideration when it comes to tomorrow against Aston Villa. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the chat as well too who your starting 11 is, and also who your goal scorers are. So from that standpoint, tomorrow we will be back at I want to say, I think the game starts at. Let me find out real quick. Starts at 9:00. So we the Hotspur watch along will begin at 8:45 Eastern time, and of course we will have the Hotspur watch along, Spurs versus Villa from the stadium. I hope it's going to be absolutely. Me personally, I hope it's bananas, man. I hope the supporters make it loud, make it obnoxious. And I hope Spurs actually feed off the energy of the crowd and get this one started off quickly, and we get those 3 points. But that being said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and again, make sure you hit that like and subscribe buttons, and also hit the notification bell as well too, so you do not miss out on any content here on Stateside Footy. I want to thank Wayne Bonner for being in the chat, man. Wayne, you know how much I appreciate it. The Spurs Danalist as well too. I want to give a big shout out to my guy Adrian over at Spurs Diehards TTID, and of course to my guy Drew, who is dealing with some things as well too, man. And I hope that you're able to recover sooner rather than later, man. Everybody loves you, Drew, including myself. So I hope you get well soon. So until tomorrow, you guys enjoy your Saturday, and come on Spurs. Come on, you Spurs.